Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with our special preview to our 10 best recordings of Fill in the Blank for our ClassicsToday.com subscribers. Now, this is an exciting video because you have been asking, when are we going to stop doing conductors? We've been doing conductors now for about a year. We've done a lot of conductors doing their 10 best recordings of everything. And I agree, we have to sort of mix it up a little bit. We're going to. And I think the perfect transition away from purely conductors is to choose an artist who both conducts and does other things, but perhaps is best known for the other things. I'm talking about Vladimir Ashkenazy, a great pianist and, some would say, a very great conductor. I wouldn't be one of those people, but he's done some wonderful things as a conductor as well. I don't think he's one of the top guys. I do think he's one of the top guys as a pianist, without question. And he has made so many recordings. Oh my goodness. So if you are a ClassicsToday.com subscriber, you can head on over there to ClassicsToday.com to see my video on Ashkenazy's 10 best recordings as both pianist and conductor. You get both, so it's a special deal. Otherwise, this particular preview video is going to concern this sucker. Oh, God. This box, the complete solo recordings, where we are only going to be dealing with him as a pianist. But there's a lot to be said about him as a pianist, as you can see. I wonder how many discs are in here. I haven't even looked, to be honest with you. I mean, I've looked at the discs. I haven't counted. But it's really a ridiculous amount. Fortunately, they fall into fairly convenient clumps. So let's take this thing off and get right to it. You know, one of the problems with Ashkenazy, there he is. He's an amazing artist, really an amazing artist, a tremendous pianist, is that he has been sort of in our minds for such a long time that it's almost impossible to imagine him not being just a decent, reliable pianist who's kind of always been in the background. We tend to take him for granted. Now, let me see how many discs this has. 1 through 3 up there. No, it's not 1 through 3. Here we have, it's one of these things. It's very colorful, and it's in these are original jackets for the most part. Yes, they are, just so you can see that, or I can see that anyway. And we have 68, 70, 80, some odd. It can't be more than that. I would go crazy. No, it's not. Okay, so the last disc is this one, the something by Chopin, and it's disc number, is that a DVD? Yes, or a Blu-ray or something or other. But the actual numbered discs go up to 89. Is that 89? Oh, my goodness. Yeah, 89 CDs. Wow. That's a lot. And we're not even talking about the stuff he did as a chamber music performer and the stuff he did as a conductor. We really do need a box of all of his stuff as a conductor. I mean, we really do. It's kind of indicative of his reputation that Decca has done. This is like the third or fourth Ashkenazy box. I mean, they did his mono stuff. I mean his analog stuff. There was a box, and now there's the complete solo stuff. And then they did his Ashkenazy's Choice solo and chamber music recordings. I don't know if they did a box of just chamber music stuff. Maybe, who knows? It's somewhere, somehow. So you get a book. You get the booklet, and we're going to go through the booklet. You ready? Well, actually, because he tended to work in clumps, we can deal with these things in large clumps, which will save an enormous amount of time. But there's a lot of duplicative things here, too. I don't understand. I have to say, I really don't understand the way these artists tend to compete with themselves. When an artist remakes something, and I understand sometimes they have a radical change of interpretation, of concept, which justifies doing something again. I mean, I think, for example, Leonard Bernstein redoing Tchaikovsky's Pathetique, with the 18-minute finale. That was a wholly different thing. You know what I mean? But Ashkenazy's not one of those guys. That doesn't mean he's not deep or reflective or intelligent or any of those things. But his remakes have been rather subtly different rather than enormously different. And you would do well to argue whether or not it made any difference to redo it. I mean, it really, and what it says about the people who committed, I'll never forget reading, what was it? It was Joan Sutherland's last recording of Norma, Bellini's Norma. And I saw something, it was some sort of blurb at the beginning of it that said that, Dame Joan felt that she still had more to give to the role. Therefore, she had to do it again. And all I could say to myself was, well, what didn't she do the first time? Number one. And number two, isn't she playing the people who bought it the first time for fools and all the people who praised it the first time? What does it mean, really? And today, Ashkenazy happened to be caught at a point where he was really at his peak interpretively. And, the industry was going crazy, recording everything under the sun. And so he had the opportunity to redo a lot of stuff. And well, here it is. I just want to throw that out there because I don't think anybody gains by it. I really don't, unless something is going to be just astonishing, and it isn't astonishing. I can tell you right away, which doesn't mean some of it isn't fabulous. It just means that remakes are pointless as often as not. And we begin with Bach. So Bach, we have the Well-Tempered Clavier, books 1 and 2. These are very good. Ashkenazy's not thought of as a Bach pianist, but his Well-Tempered Clavier is really a good Well-Tempered Clavier on the piano. So are his partitas. There you have the partitas here, and the French Overture, and the aria varied in the Italian manner, and some Italian concerto and other things in the French suites. The French suites were quite late. They're very, very fine. He is a sensitive Bach pianist. We have the English suites here, 3 of them anyway. And that, I think, he only did 3 of those, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, his Bach playing is very sensitive. It's good, solid Bach playing. I don't think he'll ever have the reputation as a Bach pianist, but it's very hard to fault him, other than the fact that he's not one of these, period instrument guys. And, that's a matter of taste. But you cannot say that he's not well-equipped and interpretively capable, and he doesn't render his Bach with a great deal of taste and finesse and artistry. So that's good, and that takes us all the way up to CD number 9 already. We're just flying along, aren't we? Isn't that handy? All right, next we get Beethoven. Now, the Beethoven stuff is all the sonatas. There's a standard run of all the sonatas. And then there was a remake of the last 3 sonatas. Let's see what else have we got here. These are all in different orders, which is really annoying. It would be nice if they'd done them all chronologically or whatever, but they haven't. And there's a couple Hammer claviers. There's the analog and there's the digital remake. And let's see, yes, there's the bagatelles and For Elise, which of course is worth the price of the whole set. You want to get 89 CDs of Ashkenazy in order to get For Elise. And we have the Diabelli variations. And let's see, okay, that's it. That takes us all the way up to, let's see, CD 27. Now, what do we say about Ashkenazy's Beethoven in very broad terms? Because this is a very broad term review. I can't get into excruciating detail. A couple of things to note. First of all, Ashkenazy is a very good Beethoven pianist. He really is. And, a lot of his reputation rests on his Beethoven, and he's done the concerto, 3 times now? Concerto cycles, and they're fabulous. I mean, he's very, very good in Beethoven. But one of the things we note in going through these Beethovens is that the recording quality that he got from Decca has been enormously inconsistent. Really, really inconsistent. I mean, these Diabelli variations do not sound very good. They truly do not. It's not a great Diabelli. The sonatas themselves, well, they're fine. But there's also where he was able to redo the sonatas and make, revisit the interpretation. That's where I make the point that you don't hear huge differences. It's not that you won't have a preference for one performance over another, or he hasn't figured some things out that he didn't do the previous time. That's just natural. But it's radically different? No. Not at all. There was no need to duplicate, frankly, unless you were going to get vastly improved sound. But throughout his career, he's had really iffy sonics, from one recording to the next. And it's a shame because I saw him perform many times. He has a beautiful tone. He really does. He has a lovely tone, and the Decca engineers didn't always capture it, and it's worth pointing out. Again, we don't have to get into details. The Diabellis are one, and there will be some others, but we find that sort of variability is something you just have to keep in mind when you listen to this set. So then we have a disc of piano works by British composer Howard Blake, who wrote a lot of music. His most famous work is this thing called Walking in the Air from his piano cycle, Life Cycle. And he's done a lot of work in television and film and whatnot. And he's a very good composer. He's a good commercial composer, and he's begun writing a lot more sort of classical stuff. He wrote a piano concerto and some other stuff. And we get the Dances for Two Pianos and the Sonata for Two Pianos and other stuff with Wolfgang Ashkenazy, Vladimir's son. And it's nice music. The 8 character pieces in the Life Cycle, they're, prelude, nocturne, impromptu, toccatina, etc. A nice disc of very different repertoire for Ashkenazy because he really does tend to stick to the standard stuff. Some of the things that he's recorded outside of the standard stuff were not for Decca. There was, for example, like the Radovara Third Piano Concerto, which was written for him and which is quite beautiful, and that's on Ondine. So there you go. Then we have Brahms. Let's see what we have with Brahms. We're already up to CD 29 now. The Handel Variations, the Piano Sonata number 3, and that's it for Brahms. I mean, that's it. It's okay. It's a Brahms disc. I remember listening to this like years ago. I didn't re-listen to it for this set, I have to be honest. And I thought the Handel Variations were really, really good. And the Sonata tended to sprawl a bit, but that's me. Ashkenazy, remember also, he made several recordings of the piano concertos, and nobody thinks his recording of the Brahms Piano Concerti is one of the top Brahms Piano Concerti cycles. So, take that for what it's worth. Then we have Chopin. Now, Ashkenazy has done the complete works of Chopin, and he is a wonderful pianist in the complete works of Chopin. He really, really is. And I really like his Chopin. A lot of it is first rate. I mean, the preludes are wonderful. The etudes are wonderful. The ballades are very fine. I think the second piano sonata is gorgeous. And, his polonaises are not so fabulous compared to some of the other people out there. But basically, he's as good a Chopin pianist as anybody. And of all the people who've done the complete piano works, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more consistent Chopin player. So Chopin is great. Waltzes are wonderful, too. Really, really wonderful. And there's some remakes and things like that here. But let's just get through it and see what we're up to when we get done with Chopin. Well, we are going to be quite far ahead. Chopin takes us to, up there we go, CD number 49. Okay, we're making progress. We're halfway there because of, Ashkenazy's focus, which is a good thing, at least when you're doing lengthy videos such as this. Next, Liszt. Well, there isn't much here. He just did a selected few transcendental etudes and the Nocturne, the impromptu S191, which is 2 minutes and 57 seconds, and a fabulous Mephisto Waltz number 1. Oh my goodness, he does a great Mephisto Waltz. He really does. He did an earlier one from when he was still in Russia that was like on Melodia or something, and that's really quite splendid as well. It really is. He had a feeling for that. I wish he'd done more Liszt. I think he would have been a wonderful Liszt pianist for Liszt solo music, but it is what it is. That's not very much. So that was CD 50. Then we get Mozart. Okay, Mozart is a thing. We have some Mozart piano sonatas. One disc. Sonatas 18, the Rondo, Sonata number 8, two discs, pardon me. The Fantasia in C minor, Sonata 17 in B flat, number 14 in C minor, number 9 in D major, and the Adagio in B minor K540. Okay, it's tasteful, decent Mozart without, well, let's put it this way, it's just a touch bland. It's like his Mozart concertos. He's certainly, God knows he has the chops for it, and he plays it nicely, but you listen in vain for any kind of startling insight beyond just good, tasteful performance. You won't be bored. You won't be thrilled. And that's what it is with Mozart. Now, Mussorgsky, Pictures in an Exhibition. Okay, so they give us the whole disc, which is rather nice of them, of the 1967 Pictures in an Exhibition with the orchestral version that Zubin Mehta did with the LA Philharmonic on the other side. I owned that LP, so many of us did. It's a very good Pictures in an Exhibition. So is his 1982 remake. I prefer the Sonics from 1967. I really do. I think they're warmer and more natural than the 1982 remake. But that also contains some stuff by Taneyev, the Prelude and Fugue in G sharp, Lyudov's musical Snuffbox, Borodin's Scherzo in A flat, and Tchaikovsky's Dumka, Opus 59. So, I can't complain about having that. That's rather nice. Definitely nice to have. We also get Prokofiev. And Ashkenazy has not done as much Prokofiev as he might have. He should have done the complete sonatas, I think. He's a very, very fine Prokofiev conductor and pianist. He really is. This was one of the things that was, he really could have, staked his claim to it. But he was very selective in his Prokofiev. We get Piano Sonatas 7 and 8 twice. And once again, I tend to prefer his earlier ones from 1967 or 68. They're 67, 68 for 7 and 8. He does them both beautifully, but they're very good both times. They really are. Then you get like a little bit of Romeo and Juliet, and you get Piano Sonata number 6, which is nice. And let's see, we did Romeo and Juliet, 6 pieces from Cinderella, a bit from The Love for Three Oranges, and I think that's it for Prokofiev. Yeah, that was it for Prokofiev. And that takes us up to CD 57. Ashkenazy really, really did marvelous Prokofiev. And I just wish instead of remaking Sonatas 7 and 8, he could have done some other ones instead. But he didn't, so we're stuck with what we have. Next, Rachmaninoff. Now, Ashkenazy is unquestionably one of the great Rachmaninoff pianists out there. His complete Rachmaninoff piano music is probably the reference edition, all things considered. It's wonderful stuff. I mean, I don't think he puts a foot wrong anywhere in it. The Corelli variations are wonderful. The Etude Tableau are wonderful. The preludes are fantastic. The piano sonatas are excellent. There's some of the stuff he remade. There's the Corelli variations he did twice. Everybody tends to prefer, like me, for example, his earlier versions. I think some of his remakes in Rachmaninoff are a little better. I like the second Corelli variations. I think they have a little bit more diversity in character from section to section. But, this is impossible to choose. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful playing. The disc of transcriptions, which is CD 64, is just delicious. You get transcriptions of music by Bach and Schubert and Mendelssohn and Bizet and Mussorgsky and Rimsky and Tchaikovsky and Franz Baer and Rachmaninoff himself, his songs, and Kreisler, and oh my goodness, tons of stuff. Just amazing, amazing things, and he does it phenomenally. Let's just say that it's one of the great achievements in his discography and in the pianistic discography generally, because Rachmaninoff's solo piano music actually is it's rather interesting because it's not known for many pieces. There's like a couple of preludes and a few other things, vocalese transcribed, but his piano music is difficult. Rachmaninoff, it's full of notes, it's thick, and you have to really know how to phrase it and play it and disentangle it. And Ashkenazy does a wonderful job with it. So that's absolutely splendid. And then we've got some recital stuff, a couple Chopin things. This is a wonderful disc. This is the Chopin Scherzo number 4, Nocturne number 17, Debussy's L'Île Joyeuse, and Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit from 1965. Now, he did Gaspard de la Nuit twice, both times quite well. Again, nobody thinks of Ashkenazy as a Ravel guy, but his Ravel's really good. And the second time around, from 1982, you get, in addition to Gaspard, you get the Pavane for A Dead Princess, and you get the Valse Noble et Sentimentale. Yay! Beautiful discs. Beautiful, beautiful discs. They're lots of fun. Then we have Schubert. Okay, now the Schubert is also rather selective. We have Piano Sonatas 13, and some other little pieces, by the way. Some waltzes and other things. But Piano Sonatas 13, 14, 17, 18, and 21. Yeah, there's D960, and the Wanderer Fantasy, and the 4 Impromptus, and number 20 in A. So you get all your basic Schubert. And Ashkenazy's Schubert is somewhat, at least in my opinion, somewhat like his Mozart. It's tasteful and sensible and intelligent and just a little lacking in distinction. You know, Schubert has all of these moments where things are going along like, swimmingly, and then all of a sudden something kind of scary or strange happens. And Ashkenazy doesn't quite make enough of those moments. I mean, he's no Radu Lupu in terms of sensitivity, or Alfred Brendel in terms of sort of quirkiness, or, it's all rational. And with Schubert, something strange is always ready to burst out. But on the other hand, I will say this, he has no issue with the music technically. It's played extremely well from that point of view. The Wanderer Fantasy is a very, very good performance. So, you're not going to be disappointed. But if you have, these Schubert specialist people who really nail Schubert, Richter and other folks like that, you're going to find Ashkenazy to be a bit plain. And that's the worst I can say about it. It's just that. Then we have Schumann. Okay. Now, Schumann, Ashkenazy was going to do a complete Schumann cycle, but he stopped at about 8 discs worth of it. You have the Fantasy in C, the Symphonic Studies, hang on, Kreisleriana, Humoresque, Arabesque in C, Papillon, and more Symphonic Studies. Again, he did them twice. Like we needed that. A really terrific Carnival. He did a great Carnival. The Humoresque, Opus 20, some of the novelettes, the Waldscenen, Kinderscenen, Piano Sonata number 1, the Fantasia Stücke, Blumenstücke, Davidsbündler Tenza, or Davidsbündler Tenza if you want to be technical, Kreisleriana, Piano Sonata number 2, the Abegg Variations, the novelette number 8, Faschingsschwank aus Wien, the other Fantasy in C from 1993. Now, these, quite frankly, are some of the worst recordings that Decca gave him. Some of these Schumanns. Jed Disler talked about some of these Schumann recordings over at ClassicsToday.com, and you can take a look at his review, and he's 100% right. These are some of the most terrible piano recordings. As far as a Schumann performer goes, I mean, that Carnival is wonderful. Ashkenazy blows hot and cold. In the music. It's probably a good thing he stopped when he did, because again, lots of people do Schumann. I wish he'd done more other things. I keep saying that, but it's true. He really could have gotten outside the standard piano stuff, and I think he would have done a Schumann box that would have been like his Rachmaninoff and his Chopin, but it wouldn't have been as good. Just wouldn't have been as good. So we have, let's see, more Schumann, some Bunte Blätter, and that's that. So that's Schumann. We're up to CD 81. Now we get to Scriabin. We get to the complete piano sonatas. I love his Scriabin piano sonatas. It's one of the great Scriabin cycles. It's absolutely first class, and you get them all with some other things too. 2 dances, 2 poem, 4 pieces, and then a whole bunch of other little Scriabin things, mazurkas and etudes and preludes and morceaux and a feuillet d'album and more poems and vers la flamme. You gotta have vers la flamme, toward the flame. And oh goodness, it's just wonderful. His Scriabin's first class. That's another one of his great cycles. Scriabin, Chopin, Rachmaninoff. Those 3 are astonishing. They really are. Then we have Shostakovich, Preludes and Fugues, Opus 86. One of his last major projects, and it's first rate. It's first rate, and I'm so happy he was in good form. They say that because of his conducting and other commitments, and also, health and other issues, that his playing deteriorated in his later years. And maybe it did, and maybe it didn't in some respects. But he was really pulled himself together for Shostakovich's Preludes and Fugues. And thank God he did it. Something that was a little bit outside the average thing. The only problem, it's not even a problem, it's just a fact of timing, is that, lots of people had been doing them by the time Ashkenazy got around to it. And so it wasn't as astonishing an achievement as it should have been or might have been had he done it a decade or two earlier. But that's okay. We're happy to have it. He also did Shostakovich Piano Sonata No. 2, the Three Fantastic Dances, Selected Preludes Opus 2, some film music, aphorisms, and other juicy things. It's all very, very fine. Wonderful, and I'm happy to have it. Then Tchaikovsky. This is CD 89. We're at the end. Yep, the end. It's Tchaikovsky, little pieces, Meditation, Polka peu dansante, Aveu passionné, Tendre reproche, Berceuse, and The Seasons, all 12 of them. And The Seasons is such a wonderful way, it's a beautiful performance, it's such a wonderful way to end this huge box, because, Ashkenazy's career was so much an entire cycle, wasn't it? It really was. It's a lifetime in a box. I going back and thinking about all the stuff that's in here. Let me put this sucker back together. You have to be impressed by the achievement that it represents, because it's only, remember, a fraction of what he did. I mean, he made fabulous recordings of piano music and some really fabulous recordings as a conductor. But for the piano stuff, do you need this enormous box? Well, let me put it to you this way. This is very handy, too, to lean on. It's comfortable. If you've got Rachmaninoff, and if you've got Scriabin, and if you've got Chopin, and arguably the first Beethoven Sonata cycle as well, then you probably have the best of him. Also the Shostakovich Preludes and Fugues, and maybe some of the Bach stuff. And the other stuff, you can pick and choose as you please. But you don't need to get 89 CDs, because those were all available separately. And if they're still available separately, which most of them probably are not anymore, but you can still find them, then that's what I would do. I would get those boxes. Again, Scriabin, Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Beethoven sonatas, Shostakovich, and maybe some of the Bach stuff. And you'll have a wonderful, wonderful overview of Ashkenazy as a pianist and some of the best performances out there in that repertoire. And really, that's some achievement. I think that's nothing to sneer at. And he deserves a lot of credit, and we shouldn't take him for granted just because he did so much for so long, so well. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're a ClassicsToday.com insider, whiz on over there to have a look at his 10 best recordings, his 10 greatest recordings. And if you're not and have not yet subscribed to ClassicsToday.com, please do consider. There's a link below for you to click on and have a look. So take care.